Welcome to FTB Weekends. It is Saturday, the 1st of October. It's currently 11:02 a.m. Eastern Time when we're recording this, in case something happens between now and the time that you hear this. I am Jason C. McLean, and welcome, of course. We have two people on the panel. We have Dawn McSweeney, welcome back.
Hello.
And Samantha Gold.
Hi.
And the reason why we're all here, it's because it's the Quebec Election Spectacular. Yay!
Yay!
Yeah, not the most. Not everyone's very happy about the election. Before we get into the election, though, we do need to talk about truth and reconciliation.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
it's talking about truth and reconciliation. I should say off the bat that I'm not the best equipped to talk about this. I'm not Indigenous. And at the end of the day, it's their voices, their stories that need to be heard. And the consensus during this election in areas like Joliette, in areas like, sorry, I'm gonna have to check it on my phone because I will butcher the pronunciation. Otherwise, I probably will anyway. Inukjuak and other Indigenous areas that feel like they've been completely left out of this election. You have Legault trying to rally his base saying there's no systemic racism when there's been very little improvement to the quality of healthcare services, for example, in Joliette, where Joyce Echaquan died due to abuse and neglect by medical staff there, particularly nurses. His solution for climate change is all about building new dams, but these dams have been proposed for more hydroelectric power, but these dams have been proposed without consulting Indigenous groups whose lands would undoubtedly be affected due to their proximity therein. And that could result in flooding and an exacerbation of a very poor quality of life that many Indigenous people face.
Yeah,
100%. Sorry, I was just going to say also because I feel like maybe some people keep hearing the name Joyce Echaquan and maybe didn't do their due diligence in looking into it. But even the coroner's report came back and stated in no uncertain terms that if she was white, she would be alive today. So when the studies come out later, if you didn't believe it at the time, if you kind of didn't want to hear it, if you neglected and tried to make excuses, when in Canada somebody can say if she was white she'd be alive today, we have to wonder how far we've really come.
Well, listen, yeah. I'm Filipino. I get mistaken for Indigenous all the time. And after what happened to Joyce Echaquan and another woman who died of neglect at the Lakeshore, who's Filipino, I actually keep two notes in my wallet, one in French and one in English, saying, please don't kill me, basically, because, Legault's actions are ultimately going to have a chilling effect on people of color who are seeking healthcare, especially women, when we're already terrified of being gaslit and dismissed, and in which the solutions of a lot of the major parties to, quote, fix the healthcare system are not solutions at all. I know, for example, that Legault and Duhaime's solution is to have more privatization of healthcare. And they even have some doctors on their side in this, which is extremely ludicrous. But
sad too.
And in fact, the hospital workers in Joliette, I believe it was them specifically who came out and said that the sensitivity training had been lackluster in
this is after
they said it was basic at best.
Yeah, this is after Legault in the debate held up the fact that everything's good in Joliette. And I think even Nadeau-Dubois retorted, well, you're not premier of Joliette. But then the next day, the people in Joliette said, no, everything's not good here. And Legault started arguing with them in the press. He started saying, oh, they just want people to say there's systemic racism. They're not trying to fix the problem. They're trying to make us look bad. Like, basically,
he's racist as all get. Like, he always has been.
He's racist and he's transphobic. I don't know if you guys remember, but just last year, he tried to pass a bill that was going to hurt transgender children. It was going to hurt anybody who was transgender, but ultimately decided not to have the surgery. And I know people who spoke out against that. And it's interesting because when I speak to a lot of young Quebecois, I have friends all over the province, the consensus I get is that there is a lot of disillusionment in politics, and you see it in the lack of voter participation. And so one of the things that I've been trying to do as my work as an activist is trying to motivate young people to vote, because protesting, marching, all that, it has its place. But if you also try to work within the system, The people who are deliberately undermining your rights and ignoring your needs will have nowhere to run. They'll have to listen to you.
Well, one thing I think is, especially generationally, the older generations, for example, they're still pushing the whole, it's the whole sovereignty versus federalism. It's the whole like English and French thing, that's an older generation's fight for the most part. Like it's.
Okay, wait, pause.
The fight's been over for 40 years. They've been the dominant group in the province, you know, ever since the Quiet Revolution and what have you, ever since the October crisis, they've been the dominant group. And I find it funny that for a group of people, you know, Legault's base, the people who are, you know, maybe attracted to Duhaime a little bit in the electoral sense, not the physical sense, you know, for people who claim to be so secular, they sure have a hard time climbing off that cross and claiming they're a victim.
Yeah,
that's a good one. And also,
You can have it.
The fact that the fact that they want to be treated as a special and somehow a somehow more precious class than others, while saying that no other class is precious. It's the hypocrisy has never ended. And while I agree with you, Jason, that it's an older generation's fight about the sovereignty and stuff, he just said the other day that independence would be financially viable, which once again, it wouldn't be, in my opinion. Like, while you're clamoring for Canada to give you more and more money for your failing health system that you haven't fixed, to try to even slip in that you think you would be viable as your own country, that's a triggering word for me.
Yeah, well, I think what anybody being older generations is the fact that voters in general, a lot of voters don't prioritize that like they used
I do.
To. That's not people prioritize the environment, prioritize like, you know, healthcare.
Anybody who mentions the words that sound like sovereignty, I will vote against, because
it's like the S word.
Yeah, it's like, because having lived through the referendum and watching all the companies leave and knowing that the next day, if that vote had gone differently, like half my school was moving away. Like, it was a weird linguistic trauma. So it's like, I'll speak French, I'll love the culture, but we just have to shh about things like independence.
It's very clear that Legault's primary goal is to fire up his base. He knows that he doesn't have a prayer, pun intended, once again, making fun of the whole secular thing. He doesn't have a prayer of winning seats in Montreal. And if you speak,
and he doesn't care.
He doesn't care, exactly. But the other thing is, if you speak to younger Quebecois, I'm talking about the cohort that is most reluctant to vote because they think that the system doesn't work for them. They've told me they're literally waiting for the boomers to die. And that they're hoping that their voice will finally be heard in the political sphere when that happens. You hear French speakers, francophones, saying that they don't feel like any progress, you know, younger francophones, they don't feel like any progress is being made on their behalf, where the concerns are things like climate change, are things like housing. If you look at the statistics, most younger people who are going to vote are leaning towards Quebec Solidaire because they are the only really leftist party right now. And it's frustrating because I think for the Liberals,
that has a chance. The Green Party are actually quite
Quebec Solidaire doesn't have any English on their website too. So they're they're not trying to court me either.
But at the same time, their platform is very easy to read. So props to whoever put that together.
Just on principle, though. That's for me a principle. Also, so I already voted. Holla, early voter. It's the it's the first time I think that
I'm going Monday.
My boyfriend and I kind of went in going, I guess we're doing this because it's right. And then we left going, I guess we did that. Okay. It was really lackluster. I have to tell you that what I learned was that Project Montreal, what are they called now? Bloc Montreal?
Bloc Montreal, yeah.
No, don't confuse them. Project Montreal were against Ballarama. The best Valerie Plante. Ballarama was with I can't remember the name of his municipal party, Movement Montreal, I think. And now he's a Bloc Montreal provincial. Let's get that.
So he's running 13 candidates over 30 ridings. So I went in.
One of them's in my riding.
Oh, good, because it wasn't in mine. So I got into the ballot box and I actually froze.
He's in your riding.
In my riding, yeah. He is the candidate in my riding. I actually saw him walking down Rue Levesque, I believe last March, and I got to, my first reaction was, isn't that Balarama wholeness? And the second was, he's not as tall as I was expecting. You know, for a former football player, I expected him to be taller.
But is he as pretty as he looks?
No, but he's got something. He's got a certain je ne sais quoi.
Yeah, because, and it's crazy on a when we vote federally, I actually think about that, and I know it might sound silly, but you have to think.
It's called attractiveness privilege.
But it's not only that, it's I want somebody who, when we send them, if we had sent them to go see Trump, if we had sent them to go see like to anything like that, that I want somebody who isn't going to cower. I want somebody who can take up their own space and who has that kind of stage presence that they can hold that up, because they're going to be on international TV. Like it's not.
And that was that's been my sort of my biggest disappointment with Quebec Solidaire is, where is Manon Massé? I suspect that she got fed up with all the trolling because, you know, she's got slightly masculine features. So if you take a close look, she has gorgeous eyes, first off. As somebody who took the time to draw her, I think my guess is she was probably sick of all the sexist trolling she got from her looks. And so, you know, I'm not saying Gabriel Nadeau-Dubois is a pretty boy, but I am saying
he kind of is. He kind of is,
but he's a lot more palatable for the typical Quebec voter, in the sense that he's, you know, a millennial who's kind of approaching middle age. He's good looking but soft. He doesn't have harsh features in any, well, except for the slightly, I think his nose might have been broken at some point, just as an artist who studies physiology. But he's been doing all the talking, and the biggest disappointment for me was in the debates, because the consensus was during the last provincial election that Manon Massé actually won, because you had a lot of men acting like monkeys throwing feces at each other, and Manon Massé, what?
She did well. She held her dignity.
She did, and she rolled her eyes. She waited until, you know, they had temporarily run out of steam, and she made her points and she stuck to her guns. I have no doubt that Manon Massé has a spine of steel. So where is she? She's still
on the campaign trail. One thing I remember last time, speaking about debates, the last time they had an English debate, because Legault didn't back off from it, and Quebec Solidaire was actually saying, could we send Gabriel to this one instead of Manon, because his English is a lot better? They're like, well, he's not your candidate for premier. No, you have to send her. Like, that was one thing too. They actually wanted to send him because his English was a lot better.
But my problem with Nadeau is when he was deliberately baited by the Parti Québécois leader into using the N-word, the CBC the very next day gave him an opportunity to apologize. And instead of apologizing, he acted like your typical defensive white male in politics, where he said things like, oh, I was provoked. And, you know, I don't agree with the use of that word, but I was provoked. But it literally takes 10 seconds to say, I'm sorry, it was inappropriate, and then launch into the I was provoked. But he refused to apologize. And I think that had Manon Massé handled that, it would have been handled 10 times better.
Well, she wouldn't have been baited into saying the word in the first place. The thing is, I don't know why that was the one thing that, like, I was very happy with his debate performance, except for that one bit where he got basically, he looked like the PQ guy was getting him to say something that hurt his own base. It's maybe not the voters, but the people who hang up posters for Quebec Solidaire, the people who do that, they really care.
I can explain this one. Apparently, you know, during the Quiet Revolution and around the October Crisis, a book came out saying that Quebecers were the white N-words of North America. And I believe the PQ leader brought that book up and sort of provoked him into saying something. And, you know, when you see it in context, it's not that offensive, but you still need to apologize because it's not a word that's appropriate. Oh, ever.
Yeah. But
sorry, in the event that anybody is really frustrated and would like to spoil their ballot, rather than spoiling your ballot, which is never counted, at least in some ridings, definitely in my riding, there is a person riding for the null party, NUL.
Oh yeah.
And so if you check them, that is counted as spoiling your ballot because they're not intending to run anything. They're basically just there so that you can count their votes, thus saying how many people at least wanted to spoil their ballot in that fashion, which kind of is a great way to test how frustrated we are.
And for some reason, Bloc Pot's running again, but I don't know why. I mean, isn't marijuana legal?
Hey, you
This
know
one-
what?
This one I can explain because I wrote a few articles on legalization. The problem with cannabis legalization in Quebec is that Trudeau frankly gave too much power to the provinces with regards to
Yes.
implementing it. And one of the things was that in order to maintain the SQDC's monopoly on growing access to cannabis, they tried to make it illegal in Quebec to grow your own, when you're allowed a limit of up to 5 plants, when the Constitution clearly says that criminal legislation saying what's legal, what's illegal in the criminal sense is strictly federal jurisdiction. So people challenged it, went to the courts and won. And I believe it's going on appeal again, which is another waste of taxpayers' money, Bill 21, Bill 96, but I digress. And also the law in terms of where you can use it is brutally narrow. You're not allowed to use it on any government spaces. Hospitals have tiny spots allotted, but where does that leave people who take cannabis medicinally, who
By the way,
who have
this is
prescriptions, who I have to purchase capsules, for example, because nobody's going to question you taking a pill on the subway. The pill could be ecstasy, but nobody will question it. And there are so many limits as to where you can use it that cannabis seems legal, but it's not so legal.
As an advocate, I used to have a prescription, but also, hey, for one thing, also Quebec doesn't allow for vape cartridges to be sold, which is really ridiculous considering how safe they are and how much cleaner smoke that is for people who are regularly using cannabis, how much less smell it makes for everybody around. It's weird that you can buy them anywhere except Quebec legally. Also, the quality of cannabis at the SQDC is woefully undermined. It's really
Okay,
bad.
so Bloc Pot,
Well,
Bloc Pot still has a purpose. Bloc
Bloc Pot does have a
Absolutely.
purpose, especially considering it's one of those things that's considered basic in leases, that you can't even smoke pot in your own house. So here's what's interesting. During the lockdown, if we were all law-abiding citizens, we couldn't go outside for a cigarette or a joint, or we couldn't smoke them in our house. And people with prescriptions, then what are you doing? Like, you're not allowed to literally smoke it anywhere. What we should have is places that it would have been, it's an opportunity for booming businesses. I don't understand why we don't have places that are set up for you to like have your joint out front and then go in and everybody knows you're high, man. Just go in and eat some chips with friends and watch some movies at a cafe or something. Like, make it, there's still such a big stigma somehow.
Well,
and that's weird.
I think this also plays into sort of Legault's attitude. For me, Legault is a baby boomer who lived through what was supposed to be the most fun eras in history, but didn't have any fun because nobody invited him out. He was probably with his nose in a book somewhere. And I say this because I admit my bias. I loathe Legault. I think he is a bigot and an opportunist, and people I've spoken to who have worked with him have confirmed that he is an opportunist, very much, for example, like Mitch McConnell in the United States, which when you think about it is a harsher comparison than comparing him to Trump, because Mitch McConnell apparently has a brain somewhere. So, even if you look at his policy towards edibles and claiming it's going to be tempting for children, that shows a deliberate ignorance of the habit of cannabis users, because nobody is letting their kids have their edibles. Nobody. Why? Because when you buy them, medical users and people who want to get them can go to the Indigenous reservations. They can go and they can order online.
You can make them yourself.
You can make them yourself. The thing is, they are very expensive. For example, when you compare it to say, a small amount of cannabis, for 4 candies, for example, you're spending minimum $10-15 for 4 candies. 4. So, I don't necessarily know what the level of his ignorance is, but it is clear, but it certainly seems to be deliberate, and it plays into the elderly people who make up a lot of his cohort, who have a lot more old-fashioned views that date from even before the Quiet Revolution.
It's crazy too, because we seem to, Quebec as a province loves alcohol.
Oh, yeah. We love we love sex, we love alcohol. In Saint-Agathe-des-Monts, there's a sex shop right across the street from a Catholic church. I've seen it. It's awesome.
When my boyfriend moved here from Nova Scotia, he was taken aback, first of all, the number of people just having picnics in parks and making it classier than having a beer in a park, right? Like the fact that we're just like during the day be like, no, this is classy, let's drink in the park. And then the fact that everywhere you walk, somebody is carrying a bottle of wine. Right.
Yeah.
And it's just and that's considered okay, healthy, and not risky for children. Right. I did a report on Forget the Box. I think it was in context of tobacco vapes, but the fact that you could walk into a grocery store and they literally have sugar sodas with alcohol in them and they're just right there when you walk in, how is that not more appealing to children than a closed off spot where you have to prove your identity to get in? Like when I was a kid, I remember wanting to grow up because the world was built for adults, and now it seems like what we consistently do is try to put padding on all the corners and make it safe for children in a world where the adults are really supposed to be in charge and have their safe spaces.
Yeah,
And
well,
the adults are having fewer and fewer children because of stagnant wages and a lack of housing.
but
And
the voting
frankly, having
demographic-
children really cuts into your time for smoking weed.
Yeah.
And the voting, speaking about children, though, the voting demographics, especially in Montreal, are skewing a bit younger. So let's just let's sort of do some predictions right now. Now, I think, okay, I'm usually the unicorns and rainbows guy, but like, I mean, realistically, I think the best case scenario would be still be a bit of a miracle. Would be a Legault minority with Quebec Solidaires official opposition and the Liberals holding the balance of power. Why? Because then QS could actually stay principled and oppose Legault, and the Liberals would be the ones who would have to support him, keep the government up, and that would lose their thing. And then next time maybe we could have a proper dichotomy of left and right, like Legault and QS, which I think would be the great. And I would like at least one of the other parties, like the Green Party or Mouvement or a Bloc Montreal.
Bloc Montreal.
Maybe get one person elected. I think that's a possibility, but as far as them like forming as far as anyone besides Legault forming the government, I hope that someone else forms the government, but I don't think so. What are your predictions?
My prediction is that, or I will call it more of a hope, is that it is a Coalition Avenir du Québec Legault minority government with a somewhat even split between, and I'm saying this through my teeth because the idea makes me nauseous, with a split between the Liberals, Solidaires, and the Conservatives. Though a lot of Quebecois I've spoken to feel that the Quebec Conservatives are out of the picture because of the immense hypocrisy that was revealed a few weeks ago regarding the Conservative leader's taxes. Would you like me to go into that a little bit further?
You just briefly.
Briefly, okay. The Quebec Conservative Party, they have been touting themselves as sort of an alternative to the Coalition Avenir du Québec, but ideologically they are extremely similar. And one of the things they've been doing is promoting themselves as a party of fiscal responsibility. What comes out? Duhaime owes 15 grand in property taxes. And his excuse was pretty lame. He claimed that he had given one of his properties to a friend who said he would pay the property taxes. And I'm not a lawyer, but I do have a law degree, and I can tell you that if your name is still on the papers, you're still liable for those taxes.
Yeah, my friend did the dog ate my homework.
We're just giving properties away. We're just giving properties away. This guy has too much money. Go on.
He looks like an evil, older, anorexic Mr. Dress Up.
Yeah.
There,
What are your predictions? What are your predictions?
Nothing will change.
That means heaven forbid.
Do you think, okay, so I think the real battle is the battle for second place in Montreal. I actually live in a riding, St. Marie St. Anne, which is actually a hotly contested riding. It's the Liberal leaders riding, but Quebec Solidaire is running a strong candidate, a candidate who has a very high media profile, whereas the CAQ is trying to position it as a three-way race with the CAQ. The CAQ, maybe last time they were in third, but this time they're running basically some college student who's like a plateau candidate or like a paper candidate, someone who's, because Legault's not going to get votes in Montreal. So I think my writing might be interesting. I think that's where the interest is.
NDG might be an interesting writing to watch as well, because as you both know, a lot of Liberal candidates dropped out shortly before the election. A lot of them were incumbents. Kathleen Whale, who was Minister of Immigration for a while under the Liberal government and has been, active in this community, she decided not to run again. And so they've replaced her with somebody who was an advisor to former federal Prime Minister Paul Martin. So she's got experience, but not necessarily not necessarily in provincial politics. You then have Quebec Solidaire candidate who doesn't have any official political experience. She's right out of school, but she does have a lot of experience in climate change activism, which is something that young people want to see. And Quebec Solidaire did actually come in second. The Conservatives are campaigning extremely hard in NDG, as you can see by the immense amount of litter from all their posters. But given that NDG is one of the poorest boroughs and has one of the highest ratios of younger people, if young people are going to vote, then then the ones who vote Liberal are going to do it because they don't think Solidaire has a prayer, and the rest will vote Solidaire.
Yeah,
because it's also NDG also has one of the largest Anglophone populations in Quebec.
Yeah. If you haven't voted by advance voting, we all voted. I voted by advance voting. You're voting Monday, Dawn. You've already voted by advance voting. Which riding are you in, Dawn?
I think it's called Mercier. I'm in a Quebec Solidaire heavy riding.
Yeah, heavy riding. Yeah, that was American Year's old riding. Okay, great. So you can we're gonna definitely announce it on Forget the Box who wins. There's a bit more election coverage coming up. Like poll results, all that stuff.
And in brighter news, Pop Montreal is going on. There's art displays, there's artisan sale, there's movies, there's street performances, there's concerts. Brand Van 3000 is playing again tonight. There's too much things. I shouldn't have been the only one to sign up. I can't cover it all. I'm tired, but it's so great. It is an abundance of greatness.
May I say one last thing? And this is my message to younger voters, because I am a millennial and I'm 3 minorities in one. I'm Jewish, Filipino, and handicapped. So, you know, or disabled, depending on your preference, which is there are a lot
of preference should matter on that. However,
you're absolutely right. I say there's nothing wrong with calling myself a handicapped or a cripple. That's what I am. I don't deny it. I accept it. But that's besides the point. What I'm going to say is to all the young people who feel like their votes don't matter. Your vote, if you vote, it has a chance of mattering, and you should take that chance. You're legally allowed time off from work for it. And yes, it's great to protest and march in the streets and collect signatures and things like that. But the best way to defeat an enemy, people who are actively undermining your interests, is to hit them on both sides so they have nowhere else to go. And if you're voting out of spite, it's fine. Just go vote.
Yeah. And you can also watch it does a good political cartoons, caricatures. You can follow that at Sam I Am Art, right?
On Instagram at Sam I Am Artist MTL, and on Facebook at www.facebook.com/SamIamArt.
And of course, we can read you on Forget the Box, and Dawn at McMoxie on Twitter, at McMoxie on Instagram. You can also read your Pop Montreal coverage, which is coming up. Follow at Forget the Box on Twitter and at Forget the Box on Instagram for Pop Montreal coverage, and also read Dawn's reviews. Me, I'm at Jason C. McLean, Twitter and Instagram. If you're watching this on Facebook, like, share, subscribe, and follow our page. If you're watching this on YouTube, I love saying this, smash that like button, ring the bell for notifications, make sure you click all. And for daily, we have an app, an Android app, and this has been a crazy election spectacular. We'll definitely report the results of the actual election. And of course, for daily content, please check out forgetthebox.net. We'll catch you next weekend for another FTB weekend.